It's human nature to think of the future. It can be as simple as, what will I eat for lunch? Or as profound as, who will be eating my lunch tomorrow? The Institute of Policy Studies' Prism project is about the question, how will Singapore govern itself in 2022? Your answer as a citizen is going to be different when you wear your hat as business owner. And your answer as a young person today is going to be quite different if you think about your needs as a family person with kids and seniors to support. Your answer as a civic activist could be different again when you put on your hat as a person with a young family. This is the web of governance. We each face choices among competing demands as individuals and as a nation state. And these choices cannot be made by just one person or sector. In the same way, the benefits and ill effects of these choices cannot be owned by a person or just a sector. So let's look at examples of external and internal challenges that Singapore could face, and then ask ourselves over the next decade, what are the governance processes and institutions we must have to cope with challenges such as these? Food security may not be an obvious worry, but think about it. We import everything we eat. What will happen if there is a disruption in our food supply? Here's an example. 70% of chicken we eat comes from Brazil. If there was bird flu, or more people in Brazil eat chicken, or other countries want more and pay more, or for some reason trading relations sour to affect supply, well, what will we do? Which sector, what processes must cope with such disruptions to supply? And the same can be said about how we manage our need for energy, water, and all other factors of production as an economy. What about dealing with the unseen threats? Let's start with epidemics and pandemics. Like our example in dealing with our resource constraints, our experience with SARS and H1N1 clearly shows the need for the government, community, media, and people to play their part. Now to a virus of a different kind. Cyber terrorism and cyber warfare are no longer science fiction, but a reality in modern day society. Singapore is one of the most connected cities in the world. The government, military, and businesses are highly networked and interlinked. What would it take to bring everything to a halt? What does it take to keep everything running smoothly each day? In discussing how we govern ourselves in 2022, we can also think about the possible need to manage issues that are already set within our society. Some we may have more control over than others. In Singapore today, 1 in 10 people is over 65 years old. If our low birth rates remain, and even with a steady intake of 30,000 immigrants a year, the number of working age people supporting each person over 65 years old falls from 10.3 to 3.9 in 2040. And that means we will have to be 2.5 times more productive to maintain today's quality of life. And with the entry of 30,000 immigrants a year, the face of Singapore's population will change as well. What we earn and the income distribution in Singapore will depend on our population policy, economic strategies, social policy, and global economic conditions. So how do we ensure that incomes rise evenly across the board? Or will the poor get poorer and the rich get richer? Let's pause and think. The very face of Singapore in 2022. The voters, the people that will co-create and co-govern Singapore, is an older one. One with greater differences in race, languages, cultures, habits, religion, personal wealth than we have ever had before. It can be quite a different Singapore from today. With an idea of the types of issues we have to deal with, let's discuss what sorts of governance processes and institutions we need in order to do that. And we use ideals or models just to set you thinking. So let's begin with political leadership. What shapes our choice of leaders? Singaporeans have a tradition of choosing leaders who are presented as smarter and better than us. Their presumed competence and objectivity in policy making and administration. The Confucian scholar. We also have the alternative tradition of choosing those who feel for us, who will sit in the kopitiam to connect heart to heart with us and can be trusted to represent the day-to-day issues as they are. The grassroots mobilizer. Today we see the emergence also of the civic activist, an attraction to those who are deemed properly political in arguing for civil liberties and political rights. Also for the rights of migrant workers, animal welfare, gender equality, gay rights, environmental and heritage conservation, and sustainable development. We don't know if they will make a political impact. How will all these impulses shape the way we select our leaders? In many countries today, we see the constant change of heart as people change their views about their leaders mid-term for various reasons. Is it good to have a governance system that is responsive that way? Next, let's consider the precise system by which we choose our leaders, the system by which you can become a political leader. In our country, the first-past-the-post system is used. To win an election, a simple majority is what is needed. Just for contrast, some democratic countries practice proportional representation, and this is where the number of seats won by a party or group of candidates is proportionate to the number of votes received. There are many other variations in between these two extreme models. Both have their pros and cons. Let's look at how the design of our political system can affect the relationship among political parties and how they relate to each other. We're familiar with a situation where there is one dominant party. But what about the future? And now to the civil service. Do we understand who or what the civil service does? After more than 50 years of PAP rule, it is difficult in the public mind to distinguish between government, civil service, and the ruling party. It is also difficult to separate what state agencies do and what government-linked companies and privatized public service companies do. Looking ahead, will our civil service be neutral or party-specific? Is it independent yet never neutral, as it must be professional and loyal in translating the duly elected government plans into action? What happens when we enter a political landscape that has a different power-sharing structure or even a change in government? What institutions do we need to have to ensure that we have a civil service that we want? Now to the role of business. Entrepreneurial capitalism is a system when there is a primacy of private markets, but the consequence would be an increase in social inequality. In some countries, the government does a lot to promote and protect enterprises. They might also have strict rules on wages and hiring, and business relationships with unions may be different too. In Singapore, tripartism is central to the relationship between business, government, workers. This is to ensure that economic growth and development translate into real benefits for workers. How will unions operate in the political landscape that you envisage in Singapore a decade from now? How can the business sector give its input to policy making? Would that be a good or bad thing? Finally, let's consider media. A free and independent media has always been thought of as an important institution that allows a nation to speak to itself and for citizens to check that power is exercised for the public good. But there are the media moguls that only print what sells or what promotes their own agenda. And in its extreme in some countries, the media itself can become an additional hurdle for policymakers to overcome. Governments too regulate the media. They say it is good for the country, but others doubt if it is all that simple. In the old world, the mass media was weighty and centralized and easy to regulate. Now, with the propagation and proliferation of new and social media, the power to publish has been extended to all, to you. We've evolved from being just consumers to co-creators of news and views, and who knows, The power to spark social and political movements lies at the end of our fingertips. Will we need common or centralized platforms by which we speak to each other about our common future? Will it matter how we determine what these are? Governance is also shaped by whether you think it is the state or business that has the bigger role in providing for your healthcare, housing, transportation. Think about it. The choices we make in the various roles we play will shape the kind of society we become, how policies are made, how our leaders are elected, and how we address the sorts of challenges we discussed earlier. What's the Singapore you imagine? Welcome to the conversation.